Grandma always smiled when she left, even if it was just to go to the store or to check the mail. She'd turn around before stepping out the door, left her hand in a little wave, and smile like she was giving you a gift. I started thinking her smile had magic in it, because whenever she smiled, I felt safe. She lived in a little house 3 blocks away, close enough that I could spot the red flowers on her porch from the corner. Every weekend, we'd bake cookies together. She let me pour the sugar, even if I spilled some. She said a little mess meant you were doing it right. She had names for everything. The oven was a dragon, the broom was a whisker, and her old rocking chair was a storyteller. She called me Sunbeam because, she said, I brought light even when I didn't mean to. On Sunday, she came over with a basket of banana muffins. She said, extra soft for your little teeth. I only had 1 loose tooth, but she treated it like it was a national event. We watched cartoons. She laughed at the same parts I did, and told me she wished she had hair like the lady on TV, blue and tall and wiggly. Later that afternoon, she stood by the door. She adjusted her scarf like always, then looked at me and smiled. I'll see you later, Sunbeam. I smiled back. She waved once, then twice, and then she was gone. That night, I set aside one of the muffins for her, because she always forgot to take one for later. The next morning, Mom's phone rang early. She answered in the kitchen. Her back was to me, but I heard the way her voice changed, like someone took all the sound out of it and left only air. I watched her body sink into the chair. She didn't even notice her coffee spilling on the floor. When she turned to me, her face was pale. Tired, Grandma, she started, then stopped. I ran to the window. Her house was still there. The flowers were still red. Everything looked the same. How? I asked. How can everything be the same if she's not? Mom didn't answer. She pulled me into her arms, held me tight, tighter than ever. She went in her sleep. She whispered, peacefully, like she always wanted. I nodded, but inside, everything screamed. That muffin sat on the table for 3 days. I couldn't throw it away. Couldn't eat it either. It felt like the last thing she gave me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I started whispering to her at night. Why didn't you tell me that goodbye was the last one? Why did you smile like everything was okay? But maybe that's why she smiled, because she wanted me to remember her that way, not as someone leaving, but as someone loving. The house felt quieter after that, even when the TV was on, even when the birds outside chirped like nothing had changed, because something had changed, something big, something that didn't make a sound but took up all the space. I asked Mom if we could visit Grandma's house. She said we could go later, after everything had been sorted out. I didn't know what needed sorting. Grandma's house always looked perfect, like a place where stories were still floating in the corners. While we waited, I sat at the kitchen table with my crayons. I drew her face, with her scarf and her round glasses and her big smile. I drew the red flowers on her porch and the cookies we made, shaped like stars and moons. I wrote at the top, "Come back soon," but I knew she wouldn't. Still, I taped the drawing to the fridge, right in the middle, where she used to put mine. When we finally visited her house, it felt like stepping into a memory. Everything was still in place. Her sweater hung by the door. Her knitting sat on the arm of the chair, mid-stitch. I walked through the room slowly, looking, listening. I half expected her to call from the kitchen. Sunbeam, I made lemonade extra sweet, just for you. But the silence stayed. Mom let me take something from the house, a keepsake, she called it. I picked the little wooden box on her shelf, the one she used to keep buttons in. Inside, I found tiny treasures, an old symbol, a tiny bell, a crumpled piece of paper with my name written in her handwriting. No message, just my name. I held it like it was made of glass. Later that night, I asked Mom, why didn't she tell me she was going to say goodbye forever? She brushed my hair back and said, because maybe she didn't know. Or maybe she didn't want you to be scared. I didn't answer, but I thought about her smile. How it looked like the sun right before it sets, not gone yet, but soft and golden and perfect. The next day, I made another drawing. This one was of the sky, a big one, full of stars, and one star, the brightest, was smiling. I wrote underneath, found you. I folded it and placed it in the wooden box with her other treasures. That night, I looked out the window. The stars were quiet, but they were there, and I whispered, "Good night, Grandma." If I had known that was the last goodbye, I would have hugged you tighter, but I think you knew. The days started to stretch again, not because the sun stayed out longer, but because I had to carry something I didn't know how to name. It wasn't sadness all the time. Sometimes it was just quiet, like a soft space in my chest where her voice used to live. I stopped waiting for her calls. I knew the phone wouldn't ring anymore at 4 p.m., her favorite time to ask about my day and pretend she forgot how old I was just to make me laugh. But even without the calls, she still found ways to show up. In the cookies Mom burned. But that still smelled a little like Grandma's. In the wind that passed through the trees and sounded just like her humming. In the moments right before I fell asleep, when I could almost feel her hand brushing my hair, I started writing letters. Dear Grandma, today I passed my spelling test. You'd be proud. I spelled remember without help. And I do. I remember everything. I'd fold each note and put it in the wooden box. I never expected a reply, but writing made it feel like she was still listening. One day, I brought the box to Mom. I opened it and showed her everything. The tiny star drawings, the letters, the little heart I cut from her old recipe card. Mom didn't say much. She just looked at me the way Grandma used to, like I was something precious. She hugged me for a long time, then whispered she would have loved this so much. That night, I had a dream. I was sitting in Grandma's rocking chair. The sky outside the window was pink and orange and still. She was sitting next to me, not speaking, just smiling. I said, "You didn't tell me it was the last goodbye." She touched my hand gently and said, "It wasn't." Then I woke up, and somehow, I believed her. After that, I smiled more, not because the pain went away, but because I started carrying her with me in a different way. In the way I helped Mom without being asked, in the way I hummed while doing homework, in the way I smiled back at the stars. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I stood at the door and looked at the world the way Grandma always had, with eyes full of warmth. Even in goodbye, I raised my hand, waved once, then twice, and smiled, because now I understood. She said goodbye with a smile, not because she was leaving me forever, but because she wanted that to be the last thing I remembered. Not the silence, not the emptiness, just that smile, the one that made me feel like I would always be loved, even in her forever. If this story touched your heart, leave a like to help more people find this video. And if you want to hear more stories told through a child's eyes, subscribe to the channel. Every click from you is like a hug for someone who's felt too much longing.